What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the Second Chance Live show. Where we're all about moving powerfully into your second chance. I'm your host, Daryl Stinson. I am a former suicide survivor, Division I athlete, now turned two-time TEDx speaker and the best-selling author of Who Am I After Sports. And if you haven't got the book yet, I think I don't like you. I think that means that you don't like athletes. I think that means that you don't really support our athletes that we adore, because every athlete on the planet needs this book. It helps them to discover their new identity, their purpose, and live a more fulfilled life. And because of COVID-19, there's so many more athletes who need it. So do us a favor. Even if you're not an athlete, go cop the book and make sure you support student athletes, former athletes, professional athletes, Olympic athletes across the globe. I'm excited today because we're going to be talking about building your network with none other than Travis Chappell. He is an expert. He actually has a top-rated podcast called Build Your Network that he's been doing for quite some time. I looked today and it was over 528 episodes, man. Dude, that's a lot of episodes. Tell us, before I read your official bio, what's your number one thing that you learned from 528 episodes? And I know you probably got a bunch in the queue too.
Yeah, we do have a bunch in the queue. And first off, thanks for having me, bro. I appreciate it. Number one thing that I've learned about networking is to make it about other people, is to add value. Probably the lowest hanging fruit if you are new to this world at all. Like the name of the game is value. That's what's going to help you build relationships. And I always tell people that that your network will always grow in direct proportion to the amount of value that you can add to other people. So make that the forefront of your focus if that's a goal of yours.
There we go. See, he's already going in. This is what happens when you have experience. You're just ready with we call them TTBs around here. That means transformational truth bombs. So make sure you write that down. Guys, as I read his bio, you know the drill. Hit the share button. Invite your friends. He's agreed to come on here and share his time, his knowledge, his expertise. He's not holding anything back. So the best thing you can do is share this information, this knowledge with others, because a rising tide raises all ships. And when the more generous we are, the more we elevate our world. And our world needs a lift right now, man. The pandemic is stressing people out. This racial tension is stressing people out. And right now is the time where you focus on how to build authentic relationships and grow your network. So Travis Chappell is the founder and CEO of Guestio, a new software platform that connects high-level guests with high-level content creators. He's also the host of the top-rated show Build Your Network, which we talked about. In addition to being featured in Entrepreneur, NASDAQ, Yahoo Finance, and ReadWrite, Travis also has been featured in Forbes as a top 10 podcast that will change your life, alongside people like, Joe Rogan, Gary Vaynerchuck, Tim Ferriss, and some others. And, more importantly, though, what I like about him is his authenticity. I think I first met you on a coaching call with Jen and Chris Winfield. I can almost officially say that now that they're engaged. And I just heard you just dropping straight gems, man. And it was amazing to see that. And you just seemed really authentic. I know I reached out to you in the DMs. You were very responsive. Thank you for that. Sent me a resource that has helped me grow and learn in terms of podcasting, live streaming, what we do here. Actually, part of the reason why I'm pivoting to a whole new brand of my podcast. So, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Let's hop right in, man. You often say that success is more about your network than your net worth. It's more about who you know than what you know. And I'm curious to know, why have you come up with that philosophy, and why are you so passionate about helping people build their networks?
Sure, man. So the who you know or what you know thing kind of started off as, when I first started the show, I'd always heard that phrase that, who you know is more important than what you know. And I'd heard people say that. And so since I was doing a show on networking, I was like, well, a question that I can ask people is like, oh, do you believe that who you know or what you know is more important? You know what I mean? That's a good question to ask people. So I wrote it down on my list of questions or whatever. And then I figured it would be like the shoe-in, obvious question that everybody would answer the same way. And then that would kind of set us up to be able to have a conversation about networking from there. And when I started to ask people that question, I started to realize that a lot of people had different things to say about it, and that a lot of people actually think that it's what you know. And a lot of really successful people that I've interviewed have said what you know to that question. That's the only question now. It's kind of become the staple question of the show, because the only one we've asked to every guest that's ever come on. And it's really just solidified my original opinion, which is who you know. But now I just have more reason to say who you know. And so the way that I always liken it and make it a little bit easier for people to understand in terms of the way that I look at it is, I think who you know is the accelerator to where you want to be, rather than like what you know can get you there, but you're going to have to learn a lot more over a longer period of time to get to the same place that knowing the right people will get you to, in a shorter period of time. So think of it like you're at an amusement park with your buddies, and you are going to go ride your favorite ride, and you're walking over to the line, and it's a really long line, and your buddies want to go ahead, but you were wanting to get something to eat earlier and they didn't want to. And so you're going to go get something to eat. They're going to go stand in line. So you go get something to eat, and you come back. And by the time you come back, you realize that your friends are like almost all the way at the front of the line. What do? You don't stand in the back of the line, right? Like you start doing that whole like, excuse me, like pushing people out of the way, nudging people over, like moving, like walking up the zigzag metal armrest things. You walk all the way up to the front of the line.
Right.
And so that's how I view networking, is like, if you can connect with people who've been there, done that, and walked the same path that you want to walk in a successful way and gotten to the destination that you want to get to, then you'll be able to move past all the other people standing in line trying to figure it out on their own. That's kind of the visual, is like you walk up to that line, and you can call ahead to the people at the front who've walked the same steps that you want to walk, who've taken the same path that you want to take, who have reached the destination that you're ultimately set on reaching. And so when they call you up, right, you can then pass up all the other people along the way that are trying to figure it out on their own. And that's what I mean by it's going to accelerate you. Will that person that you're passing up, will they eventually get to the front of the line? Yes. Like it's the road still leads to the same place. It's just that if you know the right people, you can get there a lot faster, because you can learn all the information that they had to, fail a lot to learn. So that's kind of how I look at it. And that's why I think that who you know is ultimately more important than what you know, because I think the what you know is extremely important. It's not something that is not important that you should neglect. It's extremely important. You have to be competent. You have to be, good at what you do in order to be able to hang out in the right rooms and to not get kicked out once you make it in the first time. So you got to be good at what you do. But I just always find that when I get around really good who's, my what increases exponentially. And the opposite isn't necessarily true. If I increase my what, my who doesn't really increase unless I put effort into making that happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas like if I spend time with people that are crushing it in the area that I want to crush it in, then my knowledge just like blows up in that certain area.
Right. Love it, man. I love it. So, one of the things that I know people struggle with, because I've been like binge listening to Clubhouse. I don't know. Have you been on Clubhouse yet?
I've been on it. I have not done a lot on it, to be honest. Like I've sat in on a couple rooms, just kind of listen, just to kind of like see what it's about and get my Clubhouse feet under me. But I haven't done as near as much as I need to be doing.
Yeah, man, it's a super addicting app, but a lot, like I feel like every room I pop in, the topic of imposter syndrome comes up. And I'm curious to know, like, having like such a powerful network that can elevate you, is that something you may personally struggle with? And if not, what would you say to those people who find themselves networking their way into rooms where they feel like an imposter because they did skip the line, like you mentioned?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And it is definitely true. And I've felt like that a lot, and I continue to feel like that a lot. I guess it's probably, to me, like overcoming it, it's just the knowledge that you belong there. Like the fact that you're there is enough to tell you that you belong there. Like you don't need, I used to think that like you needed somebody to give you permission to say that you're allowed to be here. You belong here. And it's just the only person that's ever going to give you the permission is yourself. And as long as you have this like caveat to what I just said, as long as you have the self-awareness to not be the douchebag who shows up and pretends to be like everybody else when they really aren't, like that to me is where it goes against my soul, I'm definitely not one of those fake it till you make it guys, but if you can get into the room with a bunch of people who are outperforming you on every level in life, get into that room. And you might have that feeling of you don't deserve to be here, but just don't act like you deserve to, like, don't like act like you deserve to be there, but like be it until you become it. Don't fake it until you make it. Like there's a really big difference there. Like you don't want to, like, you don't want to, again, fake it. You don't want to, you don't want to be disingenuous and make people think that you're this when you're not really this. You know what I mean? So there's definitely a fine line, in my opinion, on those things. But at the end of the day, like I said, nobody's going to give you permission except for yourself. Like you just have to be comfortable with the fact that like, this is on me to feel comfortable in a room like this. And maybe while I'm in this room, maybe I don't ever talk. You know, like I find myself not talking the majority of times when I'm in rooms like that, where I'm like just listening to everybody else and like trying to learn more. And like, and people who talk a lot are going to expose themselves for probably being the imposter that they are, especially if they're the fake it till you make it person. You know what I mean? So like I can usually tell if somebody's like real. You know what I mean? Like if we're in a room like that and they're, you know, you can usually tell if they're trying to make themselves seem like they're better than they are and trying to convince everybody else that they belong there. You know, like the way to convince everybody else you belong there is not to try to convince them that you belong there. You know what I mean? People that belong there aren't worried about it. They're not thinking about it. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, but yeah, that would be my big thing is like, you have to give yourself permission, but at the same time, don't be the fake it till you make it person.
I mean, that's so important, man. And yeah, I get exactly what you're talking about. And that's something that I've struggled with and had to balance. I think we all do in a sense, because you know, everybody has insecurities. And you touched on something about just like there's a proper way to go about networking, right? And I love when I was looking on your website, I saw like you coined this term networking Ned. Right. And like, don't be a networking Ned. Talk about like, what are some of the things not to do, and how do we not become a networking Ned?
Yeah. So networking Ned is kind of like the persona that I made up of this guy that just does networking the wrong way. And as soon as, you know, as soon as I say that, everybody's got a picture of who that person is, because if you've ever been to a business event, there's been at least one or two Neds walking around, right? Like, that's actually one thing in Clubhouse that I noticed. There's a lot of Neds in Clubhouse. A lot of people that are like taking their time to ask a question as like, let me pitch everybody on this to sell them my thing. Like this, like that's going to be the thing that makes them a lot of money or whatever. You know, so I've noticed there's a lot of Neds on there. But a networking Ned does networking the wrong way. They think 1983 style old school networking. Like that's what I picture Ned being, like the guy walking around with a pocket protector and 12 pens and you know, a freshly pressed suit that doesn't fit him, and 1,000 brand new hot off the press business cards in his back pocket because he ran out of the previous 1,000 at the last event. And then his goal is volume. So all he does is walk up to you, give you a 45-second elevator pitch, leave you with this business card, ask for business, and then move on to the next person. Like networking Ned treats networking like it's an in-person cold calling opportunity and not a platform through which to build relationships. And networking Ned looks at relationships short-term and transactionally instead of long-term and relationally. Like a networking Ned is there for money, not there for people. You know what I mean? So those are some of the signs that you might be a Ned. And if you go to an event, by the way, and you don't know any Neds, then you're probably it. So do an audit of what you're doing there to make sure that you're not the person that everybody's like looking at and like trying to avoid eye contact with, so that you don't come up to them and talk their ear off for 2 minutes and then leave without ever even getting their name or caring about why they're there.
I love it, man. That's the networking Ned test, right? If you don't know who it is, it's probably you.
Yeah,
man.
Exactly.
Talk about building relationships with influencers. You know, I feel like, and I've experienced this a little bit when I was an athlete, especially when we, as a MAC team, were ranked 23rd in the nation and had a #1 draft pick come out of our school. It was just like everybody wants a piece, right? Everybody wants something, and it's really hard to discern like who's real and who's not real, like who's authentic and who's just like learning how to position it in a way, right? And so like, what's your tips for building relationships with influencers and people who have big platforms?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. And most people do this wrong. Just because somebody has influence or they have success or they have money doesn't mean that they don't have desires or wants or things that they're looking to achieve in life or whatever. So if somebody's in that boat, it's the same principle applies to that person. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult, meaning that the principle that we talked about at the very beginning, which is adding value to people, that's still going to be the principle that applies. Just adding value to somebody that is already extremely influential or wealthy or successful is a lot more difficult to do than somebody who doesn't have anything, right? That's why I said that your network will grow in direct proportion to the amount of value that you can add to people, because the more valuable people that you connect with, the more of a valuable person that you have to be in order to continue to connect with those types of people.
That's good, man. That's
like,
good. Oh yeah, yeah.
That's why you have to be on a continual up leveling game all the time. Like that's why you got to be continually reading the industry, periodicals, or picking up the top books, or listening to the top podcasts, or listening to the top audiobooks. Like you have to constantly be making yourself a better version of yourself, because you never know how that might help you continue to add value to other people in whatever regard, whatever way possible. Even your own network, like that's one of the huge ways that I can now add value to people now is like I've built such a good network that it's so much like at the beginning, bro, it was difficult when I didn't have anything to offer. It was extremely difficult to try to add value to somebody. And like the way that translated was there's this guy named John Lee Dumas who I was like looked up to a lot, and he was kind of like the business podcast king, in that sense. And I wanted to get to know him and learn from him. So I ended up paying like $6,500 to go to a mastermind at his house with 4 or 5 other people. And I got to know him, right? Got my foot in the door. But the whole time I was there, I was looking for how I could add value. And like I said, at the time, I didn't have much. Like he had everything better than I did. Like he knew the area that I wanted to know better than I did. He made way more money than I did. He knew all the people that I wanted to know, and I didn't know anybody that he wanted to know. Like there was no other way to add value to him. And so like the way that I did it, the way that I differentiated myself was I literally volunteered 3 days of my time to sell journals for him at a conference that he was speaking at. So like I paid for my own travel to get there. I paid for my own hotel to stay there. I volunteered 3 full days of my time to like sell $30, $40 journals, which at the time was worth a lot of money because my background is in door-to-door and retail, like direct sales. So I had a lot of experience in that. And if I spent a weekend working an event that I got paid money to sell stuff at, like I could get paid a lot of money. So like surpassed all that, or forewent all of that, and just said, how do I add value to this guy? And at the time, the best way that I could add value was time. Time was the thing that I could add value with. So that's why I'm saying it's about value. It's not about any certain metrics. It's just like, what does this person want, and can I help them get it? That's what the value piece is there. You know what I mean? So that's going to look different for everybody. And now it's way easier for me to add value in the same or even more proportion than volunteering 3 full days of my time. Sometimes now I add way more value to somebody just by doing a quick 2-minute email intro. You know what I mean? But like, I didn't have any of that before. That's why I'm saying like, you have to continue to make yourself a more valuable person, because like, if you never improve yourself, then you're always going to be working overtime to try to provide value to people. Whereas the more valuable you become, the more knowledge that you get, the more connections that you earn, the more money that you have, like the more you continue to make yourself a better and more valuable person, the more you'll be able to continue to add value to people, and you'll be able to add value to people on a larger on a larger level, as well as a larger amount of people, because it takes you a less amount of time to be able to add value, you know what I mean, to these people. The more valuable you become, which also allows you to increase the level of person that you connect with, because now all of a sudden, like this person that's a high profile person knows that you're the go-to person for this certain thing because you've, done so much in that certain area. So now they want to bend your ear about it instead of somebody else's. So like, you have to continue to make yourself a better person so you can continue to add value to those people. And then one thing that I would say that's specific to influencers in particular is you can't treat them as if they're an influencer. Like that's like you teach somebody how to respond to you within the first 10 seconds or first 5 seconds of you meeting them. Like you're going to know how they should respond to you with the way that you're going to approach them. And so if you come up to them and you're like, hey, Darryl, can we get a picture? Like that immediately tells them that like you're down here, and they're not consciously thinking like this person is below me, right? Like I'm not saying that they're a douchebag and they're thinking that, but subconsciously you just put yourself into a bucket in their mind, which is the fan bucket, which means that they're probably not going to do business with you. Or if they do business with you, it's going to be after you overcome the fact that you got put in the fan bucket when you first met them. Like you're going to have to convince them to be in a different bucket. Like, no. I'm in the potential business partners bucket. I'm not in the fans bucket. You know what I mean? So one thing that I try to do is manage my reactions and my like my facial expressions and my body language when I'm meeting people. And sometimes it's difficult, man, because sometimes I'm meeting somebody that is like really like I'm kind of nervous for it, you know, because I've been like reading all their stuff or watching their stuff for a long time, or like, man, this is making me a little nervous, you know. But if you go into the situation and they can tell that that's how you are, then they're, like I said, immediately going to see you as somebody that's in this bucket instead of over here in this bucket. So I try to manage like my facial expressions, my body language, manage my reactions to certain statements or things like that make people think that like this is a guy that's worth spending some time with. You know what I mean? So like one of those things would be like if you don't make a lot of money and you get into a circle of people and they're talking about money like it's nothing, you know, like you can't be the person that's like, whoa, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like you're just telling all people in that group to be like, oh, this guy's clearly never done anything in this sense. And again, I'm not telling you to like pretend that you've made a bunch of money. I'm not saying that, right? I'm not saying fake it. All I'm saying is like, try to avoid putting yourself in this bucket of like, who is this? Why is he? Who let this guy in? You know what I mean? So like, I just try to manage my reactions and treat people the way they want to be treated, which is just like a normal person. You know, like you don't build a relationship with somebody that's freaking out about meeting you. You know what I mean? You build a relationship with somebody that's like somebody that you could potentially do business with, or they could add value or bring value to the table in your life, you know? So you have to, you know, treat, like ultimately the bottom line is you tell people how to treat you within the first 5 or 10 seconds. So take advantage of that time.
Love it. Man, I want to kind of zone in on, you talked about becoming more valuable, you talked about reading, you talked about podcasting, and you talked about just basically being more resourceful. And I know that you help people launch podcasts, right? And, you know, part of that launching podcast is niching down, right? Is being a solution to a problem. And that's kind of one way that you become more valuable to people, is that you got to, you know, master all. Like I'll never forget being at some business conference here in Damon John speak, and some guy like did the Clubhouse thing where he came up and tried to promote himself instead of just ask a question. And Damon John was like, okay, so you know, what can you do? And this guy just listed off like 18 billion things, and he was like, I'm like sort of like a jack of all trades. And then in front of an audience of thousands of people, Damon John goes, or a master of none, right? Yeah. So like there's sometimes it's hard for people when they're like, I don't know what my thing is, I don't know what my message is. And I know you have to help people that with podcasting. So how does one niche down?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. And that's going to be the similar reaction you're going to get from anybody that you ask that question to, in terms of what Damon reacted in that sense. Like you're going to get a similar reaction for anybody else. So when you're determining your niche, when it comes to podcasting specifically, there's a couple of questions that I think that you should ask yourself. Number one is, what do I enjoy talking about? What do I enjoy in life? What's activities or things that, you know, that I enjoy doing? Another one is, what am I good at currently? Like what is something that I have, you know, a skill in that most people in my circles don't have? Or maybe even if it's not a well-crafted skill set, maybe it's a natural proclivity toward having some ability to do that thing. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, maybe you're just more naturally inclined to be a better speaker or communicator. Maybe you're more naturally inclined to be a better athlete or be an author. You like, you know, you tend to be a better writer than most people on average, you know? So, you know, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? Another thing would be, what do I want to learn? Which is a really big question that I think not enough people ask themselves when they start a podcast, because podcasting isn't always to display your expertise to the world. I used it as a education vehicle, and I just was like kind of the captain of the ship that brought my listeners along with me in the process. You know what I'm saying? So like I didn't say I'm the expert on networking, everybody follow me for networking advice. I said, you know, that's why we didn't put out any solo shows on the show for like a year and a half. We did 3 interviews a week for like the first 200 episodes before we started putting out solo episodes. because of that exact reason. Because I was like, I'm not a networking expert. I've not really ever done this, but I do know that your network is your net worth. And I do know that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I do know that this is an extremely valuable skill set that will probably benefit me, for the rest of my life if it's something that I can pick up this early on. Mm-hmm. So why don't I just do a show about that, interview people who are good at it, ask them how they got good at it, and then apply those things in my life and disseminate that information and share it with the audience. You know what I mean? So like, you can be the captain of the ship. You don't have to, you can be the captain of the ship leading the journey. You don't always have to be already at the destination in order to start a show about that thing that you're doing. Mm. So, what do I want to learn? What am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? Those types of questions I think are really valuable in that sense. And if you write out a list of all of those types of things, you might find a couple of things that are on all 3 lists. Like, hey, I have a pretty natural proclivity toward being a good speaker. I enjoy speaking on stages, and I would like to learn more about public speaking. Mm-hmm. Great. And then you might circle all of those because they're on all 3 lists and say, I'm going to talk about speaking and how that goes together with entrepreneurship or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think that not enough people take into account some of those other questions, and they're just kind of looking for a niche for the sake of finding a niche. And then that's how you end up, again, like I use this terminology pretty frequently. That's how you end up in the podcast graveyard of dead shows. You know what I mean? Because like, you started a show they don't really give a shit about. And then, you know what I mean? And then 3 months later, when you have 12 downloads an episode, you're like, why am I even doing this? This is a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of energy. It doesn't do anything for me. Why am I even doing this? You know what I mean? So if you get a little bit more clarity around those other 3 things, like those are the long-term things that you have to think about. If you fast forward the clock in 5 years and you're known as the go-to person for the niche that you're talking about, are you going to be cool with that? Or is that something that you're not really something, you don't really want to be known for? Then that might tell you that you should probably pick a different niche, because people are going to associate your niche with who you are. Like, people call me a networking expert all the time now. Like, I don't advertise myself as that. It's just people call me that because I've done 600 episodes on a show called Build Your Network, where we talk about networking. And I've brought on like the top shows in my space to talk about networking with those people. So like, by nature of association, it's just like, oh, well, Travis, he's a networking expert. You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm not. I'm just a guy that wanted to learn more about this and put information out there. You know what I mean? So I just think that not enough people ask those like long-term questions. Like, would you be cool just learning about this topic and connecting with the best people in this space if nothing else came? If not a dollar was made, not a download was had, not a listener listened, but for 2 years you put out content and all it did was make you more knowledgeable and make you like an authority in that space and build your network with other people who are also good at that thing, would you be cool with that? That's a good test to know whether or not you're going down the right path. Because if you are only doing it for money, you're probably going to be disappointed because it takes a long time to build up a consistent audience. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a long time for putting in a lot of work and doing things that most people aren't willing to do to be able to build an audience up. So if it's not something that you really care about, and it doesn't affect your life at all, and it's not something that you want to be associated with long-term, then you're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Wow. Well, Travis, it's time to do the Darryl, man. I know we're getting close to our time here, and the Darryl is where I have this tendency, and maybe it's a skill, maybe it's just because I'm weird, to go real deep real quick with people. And I don't know, like, I'll be like at Starbucks and then we'll be talking about somebody's like personal life within like 2 seconds. And I think it's because I'm just extremely interested in people's lives. So one of the things that I'm extremely interested in terms of your life is this podcast, Build Your Network, right? So you've got over 600 episodes recorded and you've been doing this for quite some time. My question to you is, are you losing interest in it?
That's a good question. I would say I'm losing interest in that being my long-term associative brand. So kind of, I guess would be the answer is, yeah, kind of. Like, it's still something that intrigues me a lot, and it's still something that I care to learn about, and it's still something that, allows me to serve my audience in that context. But since our business model moved toward more helping podcasters than it did helping like networkers. It's been more difficult to keep interest in it as of late than it was at the beginning, for sure. Like I would say, like I don't view Build Your Network as being like the thing that I get known for. I guess how what I'm trying to say is like I still have one or two other podcasts in me that I view as being more like all encompassing, that I could expand my audience and my reach with. That like that's kind of where more of my focus is the future, and doing those other couple of shows that I have in my head to kind of expand the audience type a little bit more. But that being said, I think that that's the necessary way of going about doing it, because if you start generalized, it's really difficult to build an audience in that context. Yeah. So if you start super narrow and then build that audience to the point where you're cool with it, then you can like move on into something that's more generalized and be able to attract a better and bigger audience. So that's kind of been my plan.
Yeah. That's cool. I asked it because I was just thinking like, man, it's got to get repetitive after some time. You know, there's only so many tips in the networking realm, and then people learn from each other. So you start getting people who just said the same thing that this guy said. And that's all. I was just wondering about that. So anyways, I want to shift into talking about Guestio, and that's where we're going to land the plane. Why did you create it, and what's the benefit, and how can people find out about it?
So I created it because one of the top questions I was getting from people was, how were you able to book these top guests on your show? In association with the other generic podcast questions everybody asks, like how do you monetize and how do you grow? The other big question for me in particular was, without starting from anything with anything from scratch, without starting with anything at the beginning and literally starting from scratch, how were you able to go get this person, and this person to say yes to an interview on your show? So we started doing like a couple trainings on it, but at the end of the day, the answer is just lots of persistence and lots of hard work. And not everybody, has the time to be able to put into guest development like I did. You know what I mean? That was a big value point of mine. So I put a lot of work into it. Not everybody has the time to do it. So I understand. And that's why we got to work building Guestio. So it's basically a solution to that problem. It allows you to be able to go book high profile individuals onto your show without having to jump through all the hoops. And, and if you don't know where to start, if you're starting a show and you're like, well, I would love to do guest interviews, but I don't know anybody, and I don't know where to even start finding guests. Well, great, use Guestio, because there's a totally free marketplace as well that you can go book people absolutely for free to come on your show. And then there's an entire paid marketplace where if you want like some of the higher level people in your space, your industry, you can just pay for them to be on your show and start your show launch off with a huge boost of credibility from recognizable names in your niche or your space. So it's a huge like status builder, a huge credibility and authority builder. And really it's just a connection tool, which goes back to the root of why we started all this to begin with, which is networking and relationships. And so podcasting has kind of been the vehicle for that for us. And so Guestio is a way to be able to facilitate those connections to happen a lot easier and more efficiently.
Right. Love it, man. This has been phenomenal, guys. Make sure you go check out Guestio.com. The link's there, and our team will definitely drop it in the chat for you guys. If you're watching the replay, make sure you go sign up for a profile. Hey, hit me up. I want to know if you signed up for a profile. We can connect on the app, Guestio. Maybe you can come be a guest on the Second Chance live show. Travis, this has been phenomenal, man. I really appreciate your time. This is we started with kind of like giving people a break from what's going on in the world. And I'd love to just end, man, like what's one just like positive message that you can send out there to people who are just like sick of COVID, sick of racial issues rising to the surface? Like what's one positive message you'll send out there to the world?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me is like the biggest action item that keeps me sane during all the craziness is the simple practice of gratitude. It sounds so cliche and overrated, but it works. It just works. Like you can't be frustrated and thankful at the same time. You can't be upset and thankful at the same time. Like if you truly like meditate on things that are going well and things that are that you're grateful for in your life, especially when it comes to relationships that you have with, maybe employees or with coworkers or with maybe even, parents or teachers or society in general. if you're having issues with those things, like think about the positives that those people bring into your life, the people that like piss you off, even the people that you hate that are on the opposite side of the political spectrum of you. Like think about things that might be good about them, things that you could be thankful for. And what happens is you start to train the neural pathways in your brain to seek out the positive in more situations. And you're putting a positive filter over those people every time you try to think something positive about those people. So instead of looking at somebody through the lens of trying to find something negative about them, which you will inevitably find because everybody has negatives about them. And if you're looking for the negatives, you will find them. And that's just going to make you have more disdain and more negative feelings in your heart and in your mind. If you just focus on what you're grateful for about those things, focus on the positives on those things, and really become thankful for those things in your life, then it'll start to train your brain to continue to search for the things in your day that are continuing to go well. And instead of, like if you start your day off with gratitude and thankfulness, it creates a filter of positivity and gratefulness that you take into the rest of the day. And if you don't do that, your brain's overwhelming natural tendency toward negativity bias will kick in, and you'll go throughout the day. Like that's the bummer part about the whole thing is like, if you do nothing, you don't just stay neutral. You'll probably get worse. So you gotta be proactive, and you gotta really think about the things that you're grateful for in the world on a daily, every morning really is a really good time to just sit and meditate on the things that you're thankful for, because it'll really, like, you'll notice a shift in your thinking patterns. Just the way that you think about the world as a whole will start to shift if you just start with a little bit of gratitude.
Love it, man. With that being said, man, make sure you guys go check him out at travischappell.com. All of his information is there. Make sure you sign up for Guestio. Man, this has been phenomenal. If you haven't got the book yet, make sure you head over to secondchanceathletes.com. Order the book. We still got the bonuses up for you to be able to access. We've been getting so many testimonials and reviews back from the book. We'd love to share that resource for you and with every athlete that you know, because this is a hard time for athletes. And you guys know my story. It caused me to attempt suicide multiple times, not knowing what I was going to do next, not feeling like I had purpose outside of sports. And I don't want any other athlete to feel like that. So that's why I wrote the book. And so let's get it in the hands of every athlete across the world. Travis, thank you so much for your time today, man. You were amazing, bro. We're cheering you on. I'm a fan. And guys, remember that bad days don't mean that you have a bad life, and your best days are always ahead.